So, good evening. Welcome to the latest edition of Last Bell Boxing. Today, we are welcome to introduce Gareth Morris, ex-BBOC referee. Gareth, thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
No bother. And as you can see, we got Andy at the top, the regular guest from Thursday nights. Andy, give us a wave.
How are we doing? All right.
Andy, give us a wave.
Oh, what's all that about? Hello.
Okay, so Gareth's kind of joined us to talk about A, his career, B, where he is now, and C, moving forward, what he's up to and the ventures that he's involved in. So, Gareth, I think the only place we can really start is around the British Boxing Board of Control and what happened there. Because obviously you was an official with them,
Yeah.
but you're no longer affiliated with them. So, do you want to just explain what happened there, fella?
Yeah, right. I was with the board for quite a few years. Originally, I'd finished boxing and I wanted to go into refereeing. So basically, to cut a long story short, there was a guy called John Coyle who was a very well-known referee from Wolverhampton, and I think it was John I went to, and he said sort of, to get in touch with the board with Les Potts. So basically, I got in touch, but there was no vacancies. But Les invited me for an interview as an inspector, and I passed it, and I became an inspector, which was interesting. I enjoyed that because basically the inspectors behind the scenes, they're the guys who do all the paperwork and do all that kind of stuff. So it gives you a good insight if things work with the board. And then a vacancy became available. And because normally it's a sort of job where people, they're not going to give it up. That's how it used to be. But a vacancy became available and I applied, and it was the most difficult news. I mean, I've done thousands. They really do put you through it. And I'll give one positive because I'm gonna be very critical of the board, very critical. But the one thing that they do correctly that's good is they make it very difficult for you, the training, but you get good experience with the training. And it takes a minimum of 2.5 years to get a license. But then on the downside, they don't pay you anything in that 2.5 years, which is out of order, not even expenses to go to shows. But that's the one thing, you get good experience. So I will say that. Now, so I went through it all. And quite early on, when I was a trainee, you see, I found out how the board operate. And basically, the Boxing Board of Control, they're an organisation that has a council that in each area. So London's got a council, the Midlands have got a council, the Southern area's got a council, etc. And basically, these are unelected people. And you do get one or two nice people on these boards. But unfortunately, the people pulling the strings, certainly when I was in the Midlands, they're people who won't listen. You can't have a voice. You can't stick up for yourself. You've got to be a man. And very early on, my card was marked in my boxing career as a referee because I made a few phone calls and I objected because as a trained referee, it's not only that you're not getting paid, but you have private reports written on you by people who basically, most of them have never been, none of them have ever refereed really, but most of them have never been in a boxing gym in their life, let alone refereed. So, but the board won't send you the reports. They've got this thing where, they're a terrible organisation. They really are. I sort of a few phone calls about this. I wanted reports and didn't go down well. And they still to this day, I brought it up at a national seminar to Robert Smith, and he came up with all kinds of nonsense saying about, oh well, if we send in the reports, people moan people and all this nonsense, and in the end, it's still the same today. And you'll find, the Boxing Board of Control won't change anything for the good unless they're forced to. You see, and before anyone, I mean, I'd love to have a debate with a board control person, but before they say that they've got the best medical facilities and stuff, but how did they get that? They only got that because my son sued them and won. And Watson could do because he was a high-profile boxer who had the money to, and that's the only reason now you've had the change. But you see, it's not just me as an individual or sour grapes. The Boxing Board of Control, I could name them. They've lost so many brilliant officials. Seamus Dunn, really, really good guy, well-known referee on the unlicensed circuit, really, really good referee. Left them years ago, had the same sort of hassle as me. Peter McCann, world-class timekeeper, 30 years in the service. He walked away from the board 30 years because he rang the bell as a form of respect to his dead brother, who was ex-Southern area champion, and the board disciplined him over it. You know, there's
Really?
Jeff Hines, really nice guy, magistrate, good referee, not a yes man, the most experienced referee in the country, probably on the most experienced board referee in the country. Jeff Hines, I think he must have been refereeing about 30 years. He's suing the board now. So he's finished with them. You know, on. It's but you see, the board won't change anything for the good, and most of what the board do is wrong or contradictory.
Just one question I've got, Gareth, is coming back to the trainee part of the refereeing. How do they expect you to get to shows and such like with no expenses?
Exactly right. And do you know what? Funny enough, that's an excellent point. And do you know what? I mean, this might be quite funny. I was struggling at that particular time of my life, and actually, I was also, believe it or not, what I used to do to help, I used to be a football referee as well, and I was doing 160 football matches a season, and that helped fund me while I had this 2.5 years with board. And the thing is, 2.5 years, that's the minimum. I mean, you think about that. That's half the time to be a doctor, you know, and they don't pay you a penny. But the thing is, they can keep you going. I mean, somebody once told me that old Micky Van, famous referee, I mean, I've got his book actually. I think it's called Give Me a Ring. They kept him just on, because with the training, with the board training as a referee, for the first year or so, you just do scoring, practice scoring contest. And then it's only after that, if you pass that they let you go into the ring and start. That's part of your training. But I think someone told me Micky Van, they kept him scoring for a few years, even just scoring, before they moved him on to anything else. So they can do what they like. You see, the problem is they're an unelected organisation, but they're a really poor structure. They won't listen. They don't like suggestions. Say I made that suggestion. I mean, here's another suggestion, and it's because even people who've been in boxing, like I told Steve Bunce this once, and he didn't realise. Have you ever noticed, even in these COVID times, even though I'm sick of all that, you look at the show, right? The COVID times, none of the board referees are wearing bow ties, even the judges outside the ring, but they've all got masks on. But have you noticed, none of them are wearing gloves? I brought that up 8 years ago to a guy called Richard Vaughan, who's gladly left the board, but unfortunately has managed to wheedle his way in with a few promoters behind the scenes. I mean, this guy's a character, you know, he's a clown. But I said, you should have the option to wear gloves. And I said it like that because I know you can't say anything to the board. So I was very, very diplomatic. I was very polite. I said, you should have the option if you want to. And he said, you can't wear gloves. People say, who do you think you are? So I mentioned it to another bloke, Dave, who's passed away now. And he said, procedure, I'll bring it up at next meeting. And that was 8 years ago. And they're still not wearing gloves now. You look at them, they're in short sleeve shirts. They're splattered in blood all over the place. But why can't they wear gloves? It's just another example where the board are so arrogant that they will let you have a say. They won't change anything for the good, as I say, unless you can force them to do it.
Gareth, Kenny Bayless wears gloves in America, don't he?
Oh, yeah, they all do. I mean, all over the world, Kenny Bayless in America, exactly. So what's the difference? And you know what? It's one of these things. It's like, I mean, I'd love to have a go as well, but I know this is a boxing contest. But how the board acts is it replicates the Football Association. It's very, very similar to the Football Association in how they act poorly. And the thing is, the board haven't got the guts to put writing to say it as a rule and to publicise it like I'm doing now. Oh no, but it's an unwritten rule. because you think about it. You go and watch your videotapes. You go and watch you can watch thousands of fights from British Border Control referees, and you try and tell me how many of them were wearing gloves. But why can't they wear gloves? But the referees know they can't, and they know they've got to be good. They've got to be good little boys and not wear them, because otherwise they'll be in trouble.
Who do you rate as the best ref on the current scene, Gareth?
You mean on the board?
Yeah, currently, yeah.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, I don't. To be fair, I don't get to watch a lot of them as such. As I say, I've moved on the unlicensed scene. But I tell you who I rate. Like and funny enough, it's a guy many years ago who Frank O'Sullivan said was a good referee. And when Frank talks about boxing, anyone with a brain listens. And that's Jeff Hines. And they've got rid of. I mean, look, I say they've got rid of him. In effect, they've got rid of him. They persecuted Jeff Hines for years. Jeff Hines was disciplined because he put a post on Twitter saying, "I've just refereed something like 1,500 fights with the board. I'm proud to say, sort of thing." And he got disciplined over that. But you see, Jeff's not a yes man. Good guy, good referee. They're not the type of people. You've got to be, as I say, a yes man. You've got to bend to them. You've got to keep your mouth shut. You've got to take it, and that's what they want. But I rate Jeff. You see, I mean, I'll give you an example. He got disciplined over this as well. Apparently, there was a show in London, and one of the things I noticed as a trainee was I saw professional boxers. You know, when professional boxers knock over their opponent.
Yeah.
So the referee starts counting. Quite a few times I'd noticed where they hit them and they're on the floor and they give them another little smack. And I don't mean on the way down. I mean when they're on the floor. And I noticed this many times and nothing done about it. Anyway, Jeff Hines in London, this happened to him and he timed out, warned the boxer. I don't know if he took a point off, but anyway, he took action. And after the show, Jimmy Tibbs was talking to him, and there was a official there, and Jimmy Tibbs said, "Well done, Jeff," sort of thing. That was exactly the right thing to do, and I think he got in trouble over that as well. But,
Gareth, just lift your camera up a little bit, fella, because it slipped a little bit.
Sorry, mate.
There you go, mate. No, that's fine. That's fine. Andy, do you want to ask, Andy?
Yeah, it's interesting that, because that's clearly a foul, isn't it? And I've seen it a few times, and and nothing seems to be done. And even commentary, they don't bring it up because it's as though they don't want to point out the referee's doing anything wrong.
Exactly right. Well, you see, the thing with referees, this is another point that's bringing out with professional referees. You've got two kinds of referees, right? You've got your referees who are the A stars, who are untouchable. They can do what the hell they want, and it doesn't matter what they do. I'm telling you, they're untouchable. And then you've got the referees further down the spectrum. But I mean, some of these A stars, I mean, they're untouchable. I watch them, and some of them, it is a difficult job, and I know that myself. And you've got to make instant decisions, and I know that, But I watch things that winds me up where they do, and exactly like right you say, because it's an A-star referee, and in a high-profile contest, nothing said. I mean, it winds me up. There's particular A-star referees I've seen, and they allow the rabbit punching all the time. That's one of the things that winds me up, and they don't seem to say a thing to them. But what's annoying is when you're further down when you're a junior referee or a trainee or a referee who's not at the top of the tree for the board, and if you open your mouth like I did and make suggestions that are right, because like I said to the Midlands Council once, do you know anywhere in the world where private reports are written on people, and the people who they're about aren't allowed to see them? I mean, it's And so that's why I don't care. I say this because I've told them all to their face. I've told them that's why they didn't like me, you know. But you're exactly right. I mean, there's plenty. It's frustrating because I know it's a difficult job, so I'm not gonna lambast. I'm not just lambasting the referees and the A-stars out of sour grapes, because it is a difficult job refereeing. And but the thing is, when you're further down the scale, especially if your face doesn't fit, you get pulled apart. And one of the classic things that the board do, if they don't like you, but they can't find much fault with you, and they did this to Seamus Dunn, and they did this to me, they go on about movement. This is one of the things they used to hound me about, movement. And I used to say, well, how you move is natural. I said, but movement, what's important is that the safety of the boxers, the scoring of the contest, that you're in position to see what's going on. But they go on about things like that, you know, and yet you look at some of the things that do go on, and some of the most controversial, some of the most outrageous things that happen are their top referees.
Yeah.
But they're untouchable. The A-stars get a vote on who becomes the next A-star. That's how the system works.
That's crazy. So basically, jobs for the boys then.
Yeah, it is nowadays. I mean, I'll tell you, funny, when you said about the referees, you don't get to, because they're all over the country, obviously. And like, I was based in the Midlands, even though I did referee down south in London, and I've been all over. But what I would like to say, one referee who was very, very. In fact, there's a couple of referees I'd like to mention who actually are A-stars with the board. But I'd like to say, on a positive note, and the guy, when I was a trainee, who was very, very nice to me, was Howard Foster. And I would like to say that Howard's always been, you know, sound. And there's another, and again, I'll give a little positive, but one guy who has been made up to A-star, who I am happy for, who's been really, really supportive of me over the years, is Mark Lyson, and he's a very good chap. He is very, 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 very nice chap. So I was pleased he's okay, and and as I say, Howard and Mark. See, I mean, I know all the referees, but obviously some of them, like Mark, I know better than others. But yeah, when I was a trainee, Howard was very good. But you see, there's the other side where there's some people who you can't trust.
Yeah. Well, as Nottingham lads, we're big fans of Howard Foster as well, aren't we, Andy?
Yeah. Yeah, he's helped a certain Nottingham fighter out in quite an high-profile fight, if I remember rightly.
Funny enough, I've got that in my study actually. The George Groves Frotch contest.
So while we're talking about that, Gareth, give us your take on what you would have done in that situation.
It was a great stoppage.
The stoppage one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, difficult. And funny enough, like I said, if I would have looked at it again, actually, if I'd have known you were going to ask that, which is no problem. But yeah, I think this goes back to what I was saying at the start, where, and I like Howard is a sound bloke. I will say that he's a sound bloke, Howard Foster. I think it goes back to the stage where he's made an instantaneous decision, and you see. Like I will say, Howard was closest. I mean, he's a very experienced referee. I mean, if you want to play devil's advocate, I suppose, because I think, as I remember, it was a situation where, because Groves had done very well at the start of that contest as they put Foch down. And I think he was under a bit of pressure. And if I'm thinking right, did Groves sort of bend down a bit, or?
Yeah.
What happened was, Gareth, he kind of. Frotch was completely on top in that round, and Groves slumped on the ropes a little bit. Frotch got some shots off, and then Groves kind of stumbled forward. Yeah. And I think Howard Foster's gone on record as saying he was looking at Groves' eyes and they were looking glazed. Yeah. That was his reason for stopping the fight, I believe.
I think he made the right decision because there's nothing coming back. There's nothing coming back from Groves either, and his body shape was awful on them ropes. So I think he saved Groves from a real bad injury. I think Frock would have done a right number on him if that would have carried on.
Well, you see, this is the thing, you see, and Howard's closest. You see, this is the thing. You see, and like I say, you've got to make an instantaneous decision. You see, like, I mean, the only other thing, you see, he could have done, but you see, I've got time to think about it now while I've seen it before and I'm talking to you. But I suppose with someone bending forward, the only other way around it, now, this is say if you weren't sure. I mean, what you could have done if you weren't sure, but obviously Howard was sure it was the right thing to do. But you could have, in that instance, maybe have stepped in and said to Groves, you know, keep your head up, because from my record, he was going down. And then, but you see, even if he'd have gone down that line, and like I say, I've had all this time to think about doing that. But even if he'd have done that, he could have looked at exactly like you say, his body language, and thought, that's it anyway. You see, but you see, I tell you what's good about that, because it brings back to one problem I had with them, which was an excuse. The last show I did with the board, one of the drawbacks with professional boxing, and I've said this, and Seamus Dunn has said exactly the same. As I say, Seamus left the board before me, and he's refereed a lot of contests down south. Good guy, very good referee. He's one of the drawbacks, you see, in the, you know, like the amateur boxing or the white collar boxing. If a guy takes a hard shot or is under a bit of pressure, or like you say, you look at him and you think his eyes are a bit glazed, straight away you stop the contest and you give them a standing 8 count.
Yeah.
And this is one of the beauties of the amateur and even the white collar boxing. But you see, you're not allowed to do it in professional boxing unless they've been knocked down or
they believe the ropes are
holding them up, exactly. But yeah, and there's another point. They tried to cut that one on me, the board, when I finished with them about a contest, and it was a load of garbage, right? But I've seen A-stars where, you know, the refereeing a contest and the guy's been at 5 yards across the ring, smacked into the ropes, and they haven't given a count. And like you say, no one said a word. But yeah, that's one of the drawbacks, because if, say, for instance, Howard had that facility, he could have done that, given an 8 count, and looked at Groves. But the thing is, he still might have stopped him anyway. Because like you say, if Groves was gone, and if he's gone, he's got to be stopped, hasn't he?
It'd have hurt him. I'm a big believer his career would have been on the line if that would have carried on. So,
well, we used to have a saying. There used to be a saying in boxing that it's better to stop a contest too early and never too late.
Yep, fully agree. So, Gareth, we asked out some of our viewers for some questions to put to you. So I've got a couple of questions. So this is the bit where I say a little disclaimer that they're not my questions. Okay. So the first one was around what was a KSI fight like to officiate?
Oh, well.
And what are your views? And what are your views on YouTube fighters as well, Gareth? They're not letting you off the hook with that one.
Yeah. I mean, it was the highlight of my blooming refereeing. But I mean, fun of Spencer Oliver was involved in that, and Spencer Oliver I think he'd been European champion. You know, Spencer, who had a brain injury, he's on talk a lot now. And
good guy, Inter. Good guy.
Yeah, he's a nice guy, Spencer. But Spencer himself said it was the highlight of his boxing career as well, and he'd been European. It was an amazing night. I mean, I think they pay-per-view. I mean, it was the biggest boxing. It wasn't just a YouTube thing. The MEN, it was packed out. I think it was 23,000. It wasn't a seat spare. And pay-per-view, they did better pay-per-view numbers than David A. Tony Bellew rematch. So it was a massive thing. Oh, it was just, to be honest, it was fantastic. But people, like the other question, people say, you're nervous. And like, when I referee now, not being blasé, but because I've done so much now, you see, you turn up, you enjoy it, you know, you get in there, etc. When you start refereeing, like first of all with the board, you'd be reading the rule book before you went in there and thinking, what if this happens? What if that happens? But you don't. But with that fight, I wouldn't say nervous, but with that one, I loved it. But these contests, because I knew how big it was, I wanted to just get to the end of it without any trouble.
And you've officiated at a lot of different levels within professional boxing. Where would you put that one in terms of level? What skill level?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, that is a really good question. I you know, I mean, I could talk for us here, because there's a book that I only heard of a few years back, but there's a book I've got called The Arc of Boxing by a guy called Mike Silver, and it was written, I think it was written in the 90s, and anyone who's interested in boxing, I'd urge them to read this, because what it's about the decline in boxing skills in boxers and boxing trainers. So and this is nothing to do with YouTube. That's not it. This was written before all that, I think.
Yeah.
But they were, I mean, they did 6 competitive rounds. I mean, first 2 I gave to Logan Paul, and he had a nice jab. But you see, I'll be honest. I know it'll be slated. I know what they say, they're YouTube. But you see, the only difference, the difference between an amateur and a professional is a professional gets paid. I mean, I had a talk, funny enough, with Frank O'Sullivan years ago on Midlands TV, and they were on about this and about sort of, you know, our professionals going into the amateurs and all that talk at the time. And I said, there's very many amateurs who could turn over professionals. There is, you know, but it's they're no worse than they were no worse, put it that way, than many professional boxers I've seen.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
To be honest, but you see, this brings you down to the issue, going back to that arc of boxing. You know, I'm not on the payroll, you know what I mean? I don't even.
I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering what percentage he's picking up here.
I'm a poor man. Really.
I'll put a link in the description. Don't worry, Gareth.
But I tell you why I mentioned it, why I go on about it. I've done to be honest, up before where I've gone on about this is because it's something I feel very strongly about, because when you see trainers of the quality of Frank O'Sullivan and Keith Scott, and then when you, like I used to, go around different clubs and box for different clubs and also in the professional ranks, I mean, it's not just the white collar now. I'm telling you, we do wonder who the hell are in these corners now. And one of the things, funny enough, that gets slated in this book, this Arc of Boxing, is about all this modern strength and conditioning business. That's one of the things that gets brought up, funny enough, and that's been brought up recently. There's a guy who does another podcast who's very hot on that. He really goes on about that. About all you've got all these people now involved, and there's some of them it's terrible. But the thing is, it's like Freddie Roach, and it's like with martial arts. I always like the lineage where, see, for instance, Freddie Roach. I mean, and if you listen to Freddie Roach is really, really knowledgeable guy. But you see, Freddie Roach, it doesn't matter. He was a boxer. You can be world champion. It doesn't mean you're going to be a good trainer. But Freddie Roach was the understudy to Eddie Futch, and Eddie Futch was renowned as one of the best trainers in the world. I mean, I think Freddie Roach regarded him as really the main man. And it's the same, like going back, even though it's in the amateurs. But see, that's irrelevant. People like Frank O'Sullivan and Keith Scott, who stayed loyal to the amateurs, they could have been world famous trainers in the pros if there was any justice, if they'd have go pro. But you see, both. What's interesting, two of the trainers who I know personally, I've boxed for, and I regard as highly as any trainers in the world, as I say, Frank and Keith. Both of them had very, very good mentors. Frank O'Sullivan had as a teacher a guy. A lot of people have probably never. He was a guy called Ludabella, and this guy was. I mean, he's dead now, sadly, but he was. I think he was from Liverpool. But this guy was. I mean, Frank said he had. Frank reckoned he had eliminators for the world title and won 10 of them. But it was that kind of era when your face had to fit to get a shot, and he reckoned this guy was. I mean, he beat Ross at the end of his career. Old Luddy did in America, but he was a very, very good trainer. Frank said, very good boxer, very knowledgeable trainer. Not a very good matchmaker, funny enough. But Frank obviously learnt off him, and then Keith Scott. He was at the Lynn Club, and of course, you had a guy there, as he sadly passed away. There was a guy called Frank Duffy, I think his name was, and he went pro as well. Now, Frank Duffy used to have a sports shop in London, and Keith Scott was in there the one day, and a guy phoned up, and he was talking to him. He says, "I've got to go, Angelo." He says, "There's a customer." It was Angelo Dundee. He used to phone up for advice off Frank Duffy, like if one of his guys was boxing, a guy from Britain.
Yeah.
And like Frank was at the famous Lynn Club for years, same as Keith. And but Frank did go into the pro ranks, but and Keith really regarded Frank Duffy as an outstanding guy. But you see, the other thing that's interesting, if you talk about the amateurs, that winds me up, right? Keith Scott, Frank O'Sullivan, the guy who kicked David out the gym, from the Fitzroy, I've forgotten his name. Tony Burns sadly just passed away at the Repton. Oh God, I feel terrible there. There was a guy, very famous trainer, Mick Carney. That was it. What's interesting? Why have none of those been the coaches on the England squad? Why have none of them been running the England squad? And that brings you on to another. See, and this all highlight. You see, this is what I like to do. I like to highlight all these things, these injustices, in boxing, and because otherwise things they just carry on and on. But yeah, there's a lot of talk about some of the trainers on the England squad. Some of them have been there, for years. Who they aren't necessarily the best trainers, it's believed.
Mm-hmm. Gareth, the next question. This is quite an interesting one, and if you can't answer it, please just say you can't. We won't take any offence. Rumor has it that you've been asked to officiate John Fury versus Micky Theo. Now, if you're bound by anything, please just decline to answer.
I have been asked to referee that. I really hope, like a lot of us, that comes off, because I think that's because there seems to be a lot of interest in that, and I mean, after the KSI, I thought that'd be it for the big ones, sort of thing. Now I'm at the sort of off the board radar, but yeah, I have been asked to referee that, and I really hope that comes off.
So do I.
And yeah, it's gonna. But you see, same again. It's what I have said is I said it might be with that. That's the sort of thing. Even though it's for charity, and of course it's going, etc., etc. That's the sort of thing where it needs to be done properly, because that needs to be done as a boxing match. And the one thing I do, I will not take any crap off anyone. I'll make sure that that is done properly, and that's what you need with that, because you don't want a situation where it's a free for all, and you can't allow that, because that's where. But I did say that you need a rules meeting with that and everything agreed, and then just have the gloves and do whatever they want to do. There's no details yet, because See, John
No.
hasn't agreed to it yet. That's the problem.
All I would say, Gareth, is when it comes to the time where there's tickets up for grabs, make sure you find my number, won't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're only in Nottingham, mate, so we can get anywhere around the country. So, like I've said, don't be losing my number.
Oh, no, I don't. I definitely won't. Of course, but because funny enough, when originally about a year ago, one of the areas that was muted for it was Birmingham, which was nothing to do with me. I mean, I live in Wolverhampton. It was because it was in between. Because John lives Manchester, Micky lives Essex, and that was one of the areas that was muted at the start. But I don't know. Then I honestly, I mean, I'd say I don't know. There's no.
You're just waiting for that phone. You're waiting for the phone to ring, I'd imagine, Gareth.
Yeah, I am. I mean, I really would like to do that one because, I think it'll be an interesting one. See, on the downside, just going back to the KSI, this is like typical of me. And I'll be forever grateful I had that fight. I will. I really will. But with me, something good happened, and then something not so, because I was down to officiate in the rematch because they were always going to have a rematch, and it was always going to be in America. You see, that was nothing new. That was, and just to do that, it would have been something different, wouldn't it? Going over there and blah blah. But what happened was Eddie Hearn. So obviously he saw the numbers that they were pulling, which was amazing, and he got involved. And then they both went over to the pro ranks. But I always say to people when people ask me about this, I say the irony is, if I'd have stayed with the board, I wouldn't have been allowed to have done the first one, but I could have been involved in the second. So it's one of those.
Just one more question on A-star referees. They're not allowed social media, are they? They're not allowed to interact with the public or interact with fans because of the possibility of bias. When you see these A-star referees, they've got the spotlight on them, and if they make a mistake like stop a fight too early, or the point you made earlier on about not pulling fighters up for rabbit punches or punches at the back of the head, or do you think it's about time there was a situation where if a controversial fight occurs, the referee should be allowed to give his reasoning to the cameras, for instance?
See, that's an interesting point as well. And funny enough, that's a point that's always been discussed in football as well. I mean, what I will say, first of all, it is a difficult job. I mean, like another referee. I mean, I haven't finished his book yet. Who I got on with, who I really liked. And I've seen since, and he's really nice guy, Ian John Lewis. But obviously, Ian has had a lot of controversy refereeing. So, you see, what I would say is what we want. All we want is fairness and transparency, and all we want is that all board referees to be treated the same, and they're not. In other words, what we're saying is the board, some of the A-stars, they can do what they want, and nothing's done about it. The board protect them, yet other people like me, because I open my mouth, will get, and Seamus and Jeff, you get messed about, and and they'll put negative reports in about you, and they'll just call you up, or because they can call you up. They meet once a month in secret at a place, and they can mess you around and call you up to answer questions. So it's all done. So what going to it, I will agree with you. This is one of the drawbacks with the board. It's a secret club because they want it like that, because the individual people on the board, certain individuals, they feel powerful like that. See, one of the paradoxes with the board of control is that most of them, or a lot of them, they've never had a pair of gloves on in their life, right? Now, again, you can still be contribute worthwhile to boxing if you haven't boxed, right? But you've got to be prepared to not be arrogant, and this is the problem. You've got a double whammy with the board. You've got a lack of knowledge and experience with a lot of people, but you've got an arrogance as well. When you get those two things together, it's bad. But you see, I know that the board. Listen, the board won't allow that, because I'll tell you why. When I was a qualified referee with the board, I had a letter off them to go and I got called up for one of these silly council meetings, and the Midlands Council years ago was shocking. I know they've got rid of some people now, but years ago it was horrible council. But and there was nice people on it, by the way, I will say. But I phoned up Martin Florey, who's on the board now. He's an administrative steward in Cardiff. He's one of their top men, and I asked about what this was. And, he's full of praise to me, blah, blah, blah. And you're a great referee and you did this and that and blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about it, right? Then the next week, I was at a show at Walsall and Richard Vaughan came up to me, can I have a word with you outside, out the back? He says, don't phone up any members of the council again. If you've got any problems, speak to me. And Richard Vaughan's the last person anyone would want to speak to in boxing. The last person, right? But the point I'm making is, if me as a professional referee who's gone through the system, who's supposed to be one of their mates, I'm not allowed to speak to my council, right? Do you think the board are ever going to allow their referees to be interviewed? And the thing is, like you say, in the high-profile fights, it's the A-star referees who are doing it. But you see, that this is what's annoying. Some of the things that some of them do, you'd get slaughtered if you weren't an A-star. So why should they get away with it? And as I say, I'm not pilloring A-stars because I've already mentioned names of people I like Howard, Ian, Mark, etc. That's the injustice amongst other referees. But it's the system that they're vile. There's another podcast I've done about all this, and who does it? He hates the board, and I'm telling you, I'm on the unlicensed circuit now. The board are shocking, but the problem is they're a limited company and they can do what they want. They're the establishment, and there was a famous man who was asked once what the establishment is, and he said the establishment are the power that need not speak their name, and that's what the board is. They will not change a thing unless you sue them, and it's as simple as that. They won't change a thing unless you've got the money to sue and win. But why's it got to be like that? Yeah.
Well, Gareth.
But so they won't allow that. But it would be. We should have more transparency with the board. We should have open discussion. But they're a closed society. As I say, they meet once a month. The council. I mean, they meet in. I know him in the Midlands. It's them. They meet on the Hagley Road, but I don't know where the southern area, where central area meet, where's the Scottish Council. I don't know, but it's all in secret. And years ago, funny enough, because Howard Foster was one of these, I believe. Years ago, you had representatives on there, and they abolished them. So, in other words, when you're a referee or anyone involved in professional boxing, you don't know what's been said in your name in there, do you? And no. It's just that it is horrible. I could go on. I mean, it drives us mad, but I'm not alone. Like I say, Peter McCann, 30 years as a world-class timekeeper, and he has to leave the board because he rung the bell for his dead brother, who was a Southern area champion. You know, when you make the 10-bell salute?
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, Robert Smith's relation and Charles Giles' relation, he'd rung the bell for both of those, and he never got disciplined over that.
Yeah.
So, we do want them transparent. The problem is, you see, okay, the FA have faced this. Robert Smith does go on TalkSport, but you see, this is what the other channel are saying. It's all a hatchet job. Everyone thinks Robert Smith's brilliant, right? They never get put on the spot. Why don't they say to Smith, why pay the referee's expenses? Why do you meet in secret with no representation? Why don't you allow referees to see their own reports? Why don't you allow referees to wear gloves? That nobody the Gareth A. Davises, they all love Robert Smith. They never get put on the spot. You see, never get put on the spot. And so you do need transparency. This is what we want, and this is why podcasts like yourself and other people are invaluable, because to get it out there, because people are sick of it. They are sick of it now.
Yeah, Gareth, we've took 45 minutes of your time up, so what we'll do is draw this one to a close here, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, brilliant.
Can I just thank you, and hopefully you'll do a part 2 with us at some stage?
Yeah, I'd love to. No, I'd love to. Thanks, Lars. Sorry, I tried to cram as much as I could about the
gold. Absolute gold, Gareth. Absolute gold. But we'll definitely do a part 2, and hopefully
anytime.
Yeah, hopefully, if that John Fury fight gets announced officially, maybe you can jump on then and give us a bit of detail when you're allowed to.
Yeah, 100%. No problem at all. I will 100%.
Thank you for being so open with us, Gareth.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant, Gareth.
Thanks, Carl, and thanks, Andy. I'd just like to say thank you for giving me the time and for having me on. And you see, as I say,
pleasure.
I want to make these points for other people who are in boxing now. You know, referees who are coming up with the board and everything, because we do need change. You know, in British boxing in the board.
Well, let's do a part 2,
and
we'll give you even more exposure, fella. We'll definitely do a part 2. So I'll stay in touch with you, and we'll be in touch soon. Cheers, Gareth.
Thanks a lot. All the best.
Take care, Gareth.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Thanks, Carl. Cheers.